Hey everyone, Phobos here coming at you with another build guide, and this time it's for the self-cast CI Freezing Pulse Marauder, or Berserker rather, I guess. It's basically built off the same concept as the life-based version, except there's a few small changes where basically instead of using the Covenant, you're using a Skin of the Loyal, so the damage values are a bit different there, and because of that we use an Empower and stuff like that. But yeah, sorry about the delay getting this guide up. There's just been kind of like a lot of hectic stuff happening IRL, so haven't really got a chance to play this guy too much or make the guide. I originally wanted to get him to 90. I think he's 89 right now. Like I said, haven't had that much time to play, but basically just to get a couple more notes from the tree, but I guess it doesn't really matter too much because they don't really affect the core of the build, but I'll just mention what nodes those are and stuff like that because it's kind of just important for damage mitigation purposes. So a good place to start would probably be the links, I guess. So self-cast Freezing Pulse, and we actually use a level 4 Empower here in a Skin of the Loyal. Skin of the Loyal is just normal, it's not +1. Ideally you would have a +1 one of these, or you could get a Skin of the Lords and have it preferably with either Unwavering Stance or CI. You could also do Ghost Reaver, but Ghost Reaver doesn't really save you that many points. It saves you like 2 points or something, so not really a huge deal. But yeah, so we have a level 4 Empower, level 21 Freezing Pulse, Controlled Destruction, Cold Penetration, Increased Critical Strikes, and Spell Echo. And this is a pretty good damage setup. When I have all my charges, because this build uses voids, obviously, so it has the 9 power charges. When you're at max charges, you do 250 KDPS with just the charges, basically, and your golem up. And then if you've frozen something recently because of the first snow jewels that we use in order to get the GMP freezing pulse, then this goes up to around 270k. And then if you pop your It's Promise, you're in the 311k or something like that by that point, and you're a little bit less than that if you haven't killed recently. And then Wise Oak is also a nice damage flask, but this doesn't really show up on the tooltip, and I'll get into that stuff more later. So yeah, this is kind of the Skin of the Loyal that you need for the Empower. I think it's only really worth using the Empower if you have a Skin of the Loyal, because it gets the +1, which adds another +1 to the Empower. I actually feel like playing this build and the life build felt smoother, but it doesn't have anything to do with the fact that it's life, but just the fact that I was using faster casting and spell echo. The casting of the skill and stuff just felt a lot smoother, but this does like definitely more damage. So it doesn't really matter in most cases because you're going to be doing so much damage, you're just going to be clearing packs kind of like instantly. So yeah, but I wouldn't recommend using an Empower unless you have a Skin of the Loyal and you're going to get like a +4 one. Because if you don't have a +4 and you don't have a Skin of the Loyal, then the damage difference is fairly negligible, and the other version just feels like it plays better. So I would do that. Let's move on to the rest of the gear, I guess. So we've got the 2 Voids, as I mentioned. Pretty good rolls for damage. Mana actually helps a bit because we kind of cut it close in the mana. Then we have just a pretty decent Freezing Pulse helm here. Not too many resistances, but this is actually, it was important that I get one with no res on it so I could control for my Wise Oak Flask. Talk about that in a second. And we use the Pandemonious. I wanted to try this out. It's pretty good. The blind is really nice, and you don't need life on it or anything because you're going CI, so decent amount of cold damage. Pretty good. If you were more like into freezing stuff, the other version has the freeze duration, but obviously this just penetrates 20% cold, so as long as you're capable of chilling the enemy, this is probably going to be better for that as well. So you can chill pretty much everything in the game with this build except stuff that cannot be chilled, so like Guardians and Shaper and stuff like that. You would just swap out to a different amulet. Just 2 fairly standard rings, mostly resistances and energy shield. Same thing with the belt. I actually crafted these gloves myself, and that's where the dex roll comes from. I used like an essence of energy shield essence on them, and they rolled pretty good. So and then I exalted them for flat mana, so not too bad. And then I'm using these Stepford Edward boots. You don't have to use these boots at all. It's just I was trying to find like high ES boots, and at the time I couldn't really find a pair that I wanted. And these are nice because they have no res on them, which sounds weird, but it's actually really nice because of the configuration that I'm trying to run. So I'm probably going to look to upgrade these in the future, but for now they're pretty good. And they also had the 80% chance to avoid being stunned, which meant that I could use like 2 rings instead of using a Valerium or something like that. Because I really wanted to use the Pandemonious, and I didn't want to get Unwavering Stance from the tree, and I want some type of stun immunity. Now, this is probably a good place to diverge a little bit into talking about that because there's kind of like a split consensus I find where there's some people who, whenever they play CI, they feel like they need complete stun immunity all the time, and then there's people who aren't so worried about it, and I'm kind of in the latter camp there. My cousin, I argue with him about this all the time. He's in like the former camp, but basically, I think that if you're going to be running your build through like certain types of content, you really don't need 100% stun immunity because you already have 50% chance to avoid being stunned just by being CI, and then you get 80% from the boots. Now they don't stack, but between those two rolls, you have a pretty decent chance of not being stunned on most things as long as you've killed recently. And how this build works for most of the maps you're going to clear is that if you go right from the previous room into the boss room, you can freeze the boss like instantly. So you're never actually like fighting the boss really, which means that you really only need stun immunity for the very first part of the fight, I would say. Normally there's always like ads around the boss anyway, so you're never gonna get like stun locked by a boss or anything like that. Like I run a lot of strands on this, and it's super easy because you just like clear the strand, and then you go right into the boss room, you kill that pack in front of the boss, and then you have the 80% chance to avoid being stunned, and you throw down your orb, and you just freeze and pulse the hell out of them, and they both get frozen and die very quickly. So, obviously, if you're going to be doing like Guardians and stuff, you'd want like a real stun immunity, but if you're just going to be generally mapping with the builds and you're not doing like insanely difficult maps or maps where like you have to like run back through the map after killing stuff to get to the boss, then I would say this enchant is fine, and it saves you from having to use like a shitty unique to get stun immunity or waste a ton of points. So that's my take on the kind of whole stun debate there, even in hardcore. I think that's pretty much all the gear. Yeah, so I have everything set up so that my resistances, if you look, are all at 174, and that's basically so that for the Wise Oak, you get not only the damage penetration of each type, which isn't super important because they're pretty much doing all cold damage anyways, but it also gives you the 10% reduced damage taken for each element for which you have your uncapped resistance is the lowest. So we get the 10% reduced damage taken on all elements, which is really nice, mostly for the cold damage due to Reflect, right? Because this build kind of gets wrecked by Reflect, but you won't die to it if you have the right setup. And right now we're running a Purity of Ice to deal with that, as well as a Sapphire Flask and and this Bismuth Flask right here. And on top of that, if we go into the tree, I'll show you a bit about the tree. We are working towards Ash, Frost, and Storm, which is another 10% reduced Reflect damage taken. So you have pretty decent defense against Reflect once you get the build fully leveled and stuff like that. That's kind of why I wanted to wait till 90 to do it, but you know, you can easily see, you just put the invest in these nodes here. As for where I'm going to go after that, I'm not quite sure. I could go down here and get the Path of the Savant, get some more energy shield, or I could go through here and get Elementalist. It's not a huge difference either way. And originally I was going to go to Sovereignty, but I don't really need that because I'm running a, I think it's a level 3 Enlighten, yeah, with Discipline, Purity of Ice, and Herald of Ice, and it works out fine with all the mana I have on gear and stuff. And on top of that, I have this reduced reservation node here. But yeah, this is pretty much the tree. Running 2 first nodes and then an energy from within on this cluster because it's really nice. And I'm using a brute force jewel here. You could have like a better jewel here if you had like fully optimized gear, but right now the brute force one is pretty sufficient. Yeah, the reason why I'm using the energy from within is because the ES in the build is kind of low for hardcore. Like 8.5 is kind of pushing it. I'd say 8 is kind of like the lowest I would really like to go for hardcore. Typically, you can get over 10 now fairly easily, and if I were to swap out this chest to like a really nice regalia, I could hit over 10 easily, but I basically just prefer the damage, and it's a lot cheaper to run Skin of the Loyal. I think this was like 80 chaos or something, and it does the job just fine, so no need to get a really expensive regalia. Yeah, oh, the weapon swap. So this uses the same weapon swap a lot of the other builds do. As you can see, we have the Brine Rot flag here. It's the 2 power charges on Warcry. And this is basically, if you don't have Skyforth, you want to probably have this set up as well, because it generates 2 power charges on Warcry, which means you just weapon swap and you use your Warcry if you're running low on charges, and you can't get to another pack in time, and you're back at basically 8 charges. And it's 8 charges because you normally have 7 charges, but then you have a Storm Prison Wand, which gives you +1 charge. So normally you'd have 9 charges with the Voids, but you swap over and you get 8 charges, and then all you have to do is swap back and throw down over Storms or something, and you generate the last charge fairly easily once you get to the boss or whatever. Brine Rot Flag is also very good for stuff like if the boss room isn't close to any mobs at all, you know, because you can kind of just like stand outside it and then just spam your rallying cry. It's also good for stuff like Azaro. There's another shield that you throw down traps actually and you get power charges. That's probably technically better for Azaro because once you go into the room and you take action, Azaro begins to spawn. So if you have that other shield, you basically get more charges quicker because you're throwing down like 5 sets of traps at a time, and each trap has like a 25% chance to give you a power charge or something. So, and you can like spam them, whereas you can't really spam the Warcry. So that's probably better for Azaro, but this works better, I'd say, in pretty much all other cases because it's a guaranteed 2 charges on the weapon swap. And with the other shield, if you throw down 5 traps, there's still only a 25% chance you get a charge. So in some cases you can end up getting no charges, and then you get a bunch of delay, basically just kind of standing out in the open without your main wands in, and you could lose your power charge stack if you don't get lucky. So really prefer the Brine Rot flag. Alternatively, you could just use Skyforth. I was thinking of using Skyforth on this build because they solve the stun problem, they solve the power charge problem, and they give you extra reservation, so you can maybe save a point or something. Skyforth are really good, but obviously they hurt your ES a bit. With the amount of ES I have now, taking into account all my other gear, I could swap Skyforth in and probably have still over 8k ES, but it's more just the cost of the item because I could get a Skyforth, but then I would be absolutely broke because I haven't really played this league a ton. Like if you've seen my my videos from earlier on in the league, I actually amassed quite a lot of currency, but then I kind of just like spent it making builds, and I haven't really been playing as much recently because of all the stuff that's come up. So that means that if I were to buy a Skyforth, then I would pretty much use up all my currency, and I kind of want to make a couple more builds still. So I held off on those, and but yeah, Skyforth would make this build obviously really good. It's not a super pain in the ass right now because you basically just have to use Orb of Storms, and it's pretty easy because you have a fairly long duration on the power charges, and so it's not too big of a problem there. But obviously Skyforth just makes everything completely automatic. So, and the last thing I think I really want to talk about is gem setups and stuff. So for the movement skill, I pretty much use Lightning Warp. I don't have it in right now, but yeah, use Lightning Warp. You could use, If you want to use like shield charge or something, you'd obviously have to just get a different weapon set up, but that's not a huge deal. And then we already linked the auras. In terms of other skills, you could do. I normally run Vol Discipline with Vol Haste with this as well for bosses. Vol Discipline is kind of nice because if for some reason you can't get the stun immunity, you can kind of just go into the boss room with Vol Discipline active, and you're not really gonna die, even if you get stunned a bit. So that's always good, even though it doesn't give you the max ES anymore, it's still fairly useful. Vol Haste obviously still really good, um, because it's just kind of godly. And the other thing I wanted to talk about was the penetration, and that's how this build gets a lot of its damage. So as you notice, we have a lot of sources of penetration, and that's why this wasn't built Inquisitor. Well, it was partly that reason, and mostly because I wanted to get the permanent leech that you get regardless of anything. The reason why I built this Berserker actually is because I really love Pain Reaver, because the leech is guaranteed. I know a lot of people are fine with the Warlord's Mark setup. I'm not as big of a fan. I think for some things it's absolutely fine, but for Freezing Pulse, because you have so much off-screen potential and you can clear so well like off-screen, I feel like, especially with the Blasphemy nerfs, I'm not really feeling the Warlord's Mark on Blasphemy as much for Freezing Pulse, because you can pretty much like kill packs that aren't even close to you, and you're not going to be leeching from them because they're not going to have Warlord's Mark. So I really like Pain Reaver. I haven't done Uber yet in this build, but you'd probably pick up Rite of Ruin and obviously Aspect of Carnage. The Rite of Ruin would be nice to kind of just balance out Aspect of Carnage a bit, because you get 6% reduced damage taken. And then you could obviously just use a different enchant on your boots, because you basically get complete stun immunity if you've killed recently. So that's the theory behind the Ascendancy, and it's going back to the penetration. So we have the Wise Oak. This is 20% pen, right? And then we have the Pandemonious, which is another 20% pen. And then we have Frostbomb, which is another 20% pen. So we're minus 60, and then we're minus 43 cold res with Frostbite. I think this is qualityed. Yeah, it's qualityed, which just increases the freeze duration. Now, Frostbite obviously gets nerfed a little bit on bosses, but all the other pen goes straight through. So pretty much everything you're going to be fighting is going to be in the negative, unless it's like a boss with insane amounts of cold res, or there's like an equilibrium on the map or something like that. So pretty much everything is going to be negative. And yeah, the damage is really good. I'm going to run this through a couple of the Breach Lords, and to just give you guys like a sense of the damage and stuff like that. I really like the Breach Lords because the mobs in the normal part are kind of like weak, but the thing is, most builds don't have trouble clearing trash mobs anyway. It's more about damage on the boss. Like, you could argue that the clear speeds of builds vary depending on like how they move through the map and stuff, but in terms of actually killing the monsters, I think most builds nowadays kind of decimate, most decent builds decimate monsters in most levels of map, so it's really more about that single target DPS once you get enough to like one-shot packs and stuff. So I'll be releasing this video soon, and I think that's pretty much it. Yeah, if you have any questions or comments or anything like that, just feel free to leave them on the video, and I will get back to them as soon as I can. And thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it, and see you guys next time.